this business after I lost my job after the first lockdown. But the good news is we realized there was this incredible silver lining, that we had finally the time and the opportunity to focus on our passion. And we share this mutual passion for making beautiful food and sharing it. And you're right, it's an incredible time in New Zealand. A lot of people have had their work upended. And as a result, even though it's been really hard, they're reinventing themselves. And we see this pipeline of great products, and it's wonderful. The country is rallying behind them, cheering them on.
Very, very cool. You say on your website, which is secretkiwikitchen.com, we're two mums with 7 kids, 7 energetic kids between us. But tell me, Lulu, was it a bit of a leap of faith jumping into a startup after losing your job?
Absolutely. It's always a leap of faith, starting something new and something that's close to your heart and that you care about, and then even more so during an uncertain time without a safety net. But once again, the good news is we've been so busy that we actually haven't had much time to second guess ourselves. It's been a whirlwind. We first came up with the idea of the business in July, and then we launched in August during the second lockdown. We actually launched a little bit early because we realized people were in lockdown and they probably needed a little extra chair, and that families could bond over baking. And furthermore, it's a great way, because our baking mixes are so easy, it's a great way to keep the kids distracted, while people are on work Zoom calls. And then 5 weeks later, we're now selling nationwide. We've rolled into a bunch of gourmet stores, and we're getting into different supermarkets like New World, and our e-commerce site, secretkitchen.com, is going really well with online sales. And we have this baking bundle where you can get 4 bundles for a discounted price and shipped for free. And the sales have been wonderful.
Pretty inspiring stuff going on.
I love it. The energy is just so contagious. I just love hearing stories about people who take a really terrible situation, possibly the worst situation of their life, and turn it into an opportunity to be seized. I just want to ask you, how did you market yourself in the beginning?
Well, in the very beginning, actually, our local community really rallied around us. My partner, Claire, she's really well known in our neighborhood as being the wonderful baker that always delivers the beautiful treat to your door. And then I'm kind of well known as having, the person who's always willing to have the dinner party. And so I actually think it was the local support that gave us the courage to go big. Our neighborhood and our community is so wonderful.
Hey, it's nice to have you on, and that website again, secretkiwikitchen.com. Dessert sauces, baking mixes, and a whole lot of other stuff. Go and find out. But Lulu, thank you very much for being with us on the panel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Mark Sainsbury, pretty inspiring sort of story, these types of stuff, and it's hard to start a small business.
Look, I reckon it's incredibly brave of them. I did want to find out, so I was reading up on Lulu. She invented or perfected the marshmallow fluff. We'll have to go online and find out.
We'll have to find out.
Woohoo.
There's nothing like the odd marshmallow fluff, when you want a sweet treat, right, Mark Sainsbury?
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. Mark Golonos, thank you so much for being with me on Monday's panel. Thank you to Danielle Street for putting the show together. I'm Wallace Chapman. Checkpoint next. See you tomorrow.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E Haereaki nei, Lake Ōhau residents are bussed in to survey the ruins of their tiny village after the weekend's wildfire. Labour pledges to outlaw gay conversion therapy. Tamati Coffee joins us live. National declares a housing state of emergency, so what's their solution? Stand by to hug an Aucklander with caution. The super city's headed to alert level 1 midnight Wednesday. And speaking of COVID, President Trump draws fire after an impromptu drive-by to wave at supporters outside the hospital where he's being treated for the virus. Still got a landline? Well, beware of scammers calling it and robbing you blind. And the whodunit at a Wellington wildlife sanctuary. Don't forget, you can catch us on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. The people of Lake Oho have returned to see firsthand the devastation caused by the fire that ripped through their village, destroying half of it. 3 buses took them there this afternoon from the makeshift welfare centre in Twizel. One of those on board was Janet Brown, who fled her house with her family early yesterday.
Terrifying, because when we left the village and I turned around, I saw the village on fire. It was that quick. The winds were 120 k's, I think. I cannot believe nobody died. It's a miracle. Well done to all those lovely people that in the village that live there who were so organised to get everyone out. They are heroes.
Oho resident Janet Brown, just over 40 of the village's homes have been destroyed or damaged, though in stark contrast, some neighbouring ones were untouched. Auckland will move to alert level 1 just before midnight Wednesday. Meeting by Zoom today, Cabinet decided to bring Auckland into line with the rest of the country. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
There have been no cases from the Auckland cluster for 10 days, and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says it's highly likely it's now eliminated. She says New Zealand has succeeded a second time in containing an outbreak, but warns against complacency. Ms Ardern's asking people to keep scanning in wherever they go, stay home if sick, and be prepared for ongoing testing. Masks are only compulsory on public transport at level 2 or higher, but people are still urged to wear them where appropriate. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
A 5-month-old baby struck by a car while in a stroller in Auckland this morning has died. The child was taken to hospital in a critical condition after the incident in Lake Road, Northcote. The police are investigating and the death will be referred to the coroner. Judith Collins has rejected claims she politicised her faith by kneeling to pray in a church before casting her vote yesterday. The National Party leader has repeatedly mentioned her religion over the past week. Numerous commentators have questioned whether it's a deliberate move to target voters who may have been considering supporting the New Conservatives. But Ms Collins says such claims are deeply offensive.
Faith is a personal thing. I didn't ask the media to come with me. I could, of course, have tried to order people out of the church. Imagine what that would have been like. And actually, do you know what? I'm not ashamed to be a Christian. I'm happy to be one.
Judith Collins says she goes to church several times a year and prays every day. The Labour leader says National's new housing policy would take New Zealand back to the 1990s. National's promising, if elected, to pass emergency legislation similar to that used for the Christchurch rebuild, while fast-tracking the resource consenting process. Jacinda Ardern denies the Labour-led government failed to tackle Resource Management Act problems.
Of course, we initiated significant work on the RMA when we came into government, recognising that work was required there. And that's now what you're seeing us talk about this election campaign. The second thing we've done is fast-track consenting as part of our COVID recovery and response.
Jacinda Ardern says Labour's also looking at how to speed up consenting for state housing. The director of Wellington's Urban Eco Sanctuary is horrified someone deliberately cut a hole in its predator-free fence with a power tool. Zealandia is home to rare and threatened species such as kiwi, hihi and tuatara. Danielle Shanahan says the hole is big enough for predators to get through.
We're absolutely gobsmacked and dumbfounded as to who could have done this. It really is a hugely impactful thing to do. Of course, we're mounting a major predator incursion response just in case something did get in. So the impact on our operations is quite significant and the potential impact is absolutely huge.
Danielle Shanahan says one stoat could wipe out an entire species if it got inside. It's 4 minutes past 5. New Zealand women's cricket captain Sophie Devine has spearheaded a much improved batting performance in the second Rose Bowl one-dayer against Australia in Brisbane. Her top score of 79 opening the batting helped the White Ferns amass 252 for 9 from their 50 overs after being sent in. New Zealand were restricted to 180 in the first ODI on Saturday, a target the home side chased down with 7 wickets and 16 overs to spare. Australia have won their last 19 ODIs. Veteran Australian prop James Slipper believes his side deserves to be underdogs for this Sunday's first Bledisloe Cup test in Wellington. The All Blacks have had a stranglehold on the Trans-Tasman Trophy since 2003, and Slipper says the Wallabies don't have a leg to stand on given their past results.
You know, we probably deserve to be underdogs only because we haven't won it for so long and deservedly so. But, you know, one thing I can tell you, mate, we're training hard to change that. Yeah, so comes down that first test match to see where we are.
Wallabies prop James Slipper. And the injury-hit Miami Heat have upset the Los Angeles Lakers 115-104 in Game 3 of the NBA Finals. In the absence of two of the Heat's usual starters, Miami forward Jimmy Butler scored a game-high 40 points to go along with 11 rebounds and 13 assists. The Lakers now lead the best-of-7 series 2-1 with Game 4 on Wednesday. That's the news.
When disaster happens,
you can't imagine the fear, the worry, the unknowingness and the panic of escaping a bushfire.
There's certainly some scary tales of just how close it became to being an absolute disaster with fatalities.
We've lost our business, we've lost our home, we've lost 4 or 5 generations of memories and happiness and love. We've just lost everything.
Listen to Morning Reports, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Fine weather today, partly cloudy tomorrow with areas of early fog. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine and warm. Whanganui to Wellington, including Wairarapa. Fine at first, cloudy periods developing with a few showers south of Palmerston North tomorrow night. Gale nor'westerlies in exposed places of Wellington and Wairarapa tomorrow. Nelson, mainly fine, scattered rain developing tomorrow night. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing today, drizzle developing in Westland, rain developing tomorrow morning, clearing from the south later in the day. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine today with gale nor'westerlies in exposed places. Rain or drizzle spreading north tomorrow, then clearing from the south. Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain tonight, clearing to isolated coastal showers tomorrow morning. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers tomorrow night. RNZ National, it's almost 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Lake Oho residents have been allowed in to see what's left of their village after fires ripped through over the weekend. A bus convoy left shortly after midday from the makeshift welfare centre in Twizel. It's the first time they've been able to access the charred remains of their slice of paradise in the Mackenzie Basin. Meanwhile, 11 helicopters and 8 ground crews have been fighting the fire, battling against strong, gusty winds and warm temperatures. Tess Brunton is in Twizel and filed this report.
Seeing the damage firsthand, Lake Oho residents were allowed to return to their village today to see the devastation fires have caused. 3 buses took residents in, the first time they were allowed back into the area since fleeing early on Sunday morning. Until now, some people haven't even known if their homes survived. The sad confirmation that so many haven't, made clear today. Janet Brown couldn't sleep as the winds howled through Lake Oho in the early hours of Sunday morning. Then a siren split the air.
I heard a siren, which I'd never heard before, and I knew something was not right. And our windows faced straight up. We've got these 2 big, sliding windows that looked out to the mountains, and it was all ablaze. It was orange, the whole sky, and it was very close. It was our neighbours across the way. They were on fire, and I ran and woke everybody up.
They were all packed to fly out for Auckland the next day, so chucked their bags in the boot and fled. Some residents tooted on their way out to raise the alarm to other residents. Janet turned around to see the village on fire and still can't quite believe everyone made it out alive. 3 buses carrying residents travelled to see the damage, surrounded by ridges and valleys stained black. Janet Brown knows their house, their labour of love, is gone.
It's our only home. We don't own a home. This is it. We built it with our own hands. We lived in caravans with our children and built it. We spent 3 years building it. Our hearts and souls went into it. Our kids call it home. It's all gone, everything. We don't have another home, but we're lucky we live in Auckland, so we've got jobs and we've got a place to live.
Even before she left, she was bracing for what her family would see.
A bomb site, pretty much. It's, I think 50% of the houses have gone, are uninhabitable. And you can imagine all the gardens and the trees and everything's gone. It looks like, I've seen a photograph, it looks like a nuclear bomb has gone off. It's just flattened everything.
She and her family plan to rebuild there one day. 79-year-old Chris Spires, whose son co-owns the barn at Killen B&B, woke to a phone call early Sunday morning. It was another resident telling him to get out. Soon, another resident arrived at his house, also instructing him to leave.
And then it was getting out, getting the animals, some cats and a dog and the photographs, and putting them in. And I decided that I would rescue my Jeep and leave my car. And that's when I got stuck on a tree stump and couldn't get out.
As he got stuck, the out-of-control flames were raging nearby.
I had to pad the foot and come out and climb up a bank, and the fire was sort of licking my backside. Yeah, so then the fire brigade man found me crawling up the grass, and so then I was bundled into the fire engine and taken out.
Conservation Minister Eugenie Sage and Civil Defence Minister Pene Henare visited the village earlier today to see the damage.
Just seeing cars that have had their tyres completely melted, that are shells, bunk bed frames and houses that are completely gone, and just people having to come to grips with that and the grief and the loss of houses, possessions and memories.
By early afternoon, the fire had burnt through 4,600 hectares across 41 kilometres. About 1,900 is conservation estate. Fire and Emergency are confident they will be able to control half of the fire perimeter by tomorrow night. Civil Defence Minister Pene Henare says the fire has no rhyme or reason, with some houses escaping damage while the ones next door were ravaged by flames. He announced $100,000 to help the relief efforts, but wouldn't say exactly where the money would be spent.
Oh, look, that's entirely up to the council and the mayor here, who are working with the people on the ground. I think it's important that the local government and those people locally in the community have the opportunity to put that money to best use and not from central government direction.
He doesn't rule out giving more funding in the future if it's needed. But for now, residents are left to pick up the pieces left behind. In Twizel for Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton Tane.
And Hugh and Dwayne are the owners of the barn at Killen B&B at Lake Oho. They were among those who went on the buses to check out the damage today, and they join us live from Twizel. Good evening, Hugh. Must be a pretty tough day for you guys.
It's like living a dream, but it's really a nightmare, Lisa. It's just, you can't describe how we all felt today. It's been, and I hate using the word surreal because it's been a sort of a phrase we've been saying, but it very surreal. I'm finding hard words to think of that are going to describe it.
So Hugh, you were both on the bus that returned into the village today?
Lisa, yeah, we were on bus number 3. It was quite an emotional trip into the valley. Once we turn off State Highway into our own Lake Oho Road, we feel like we're coming home, back to our piece of paradise, our happy place. But as we rode in on the buses, there was just tears and sobs. It's as we could see the trees that were still smouldering, and the grassland was all parched and black and stumpy, and where once had been beautiful tussock, it was just black and horrible. And then we got into the village. We were keeping a lookout where our house was. We're actually on the other side of Lake Middleton, which is a smaller lake beside Lake Oho, and we couldn't see the flash of red that always welcomed us when we were driving down that road.
So that's your red roof, Hugh, that you would normally see as you approach?
It's our red barn, yeah, absolutely, and it wasn't there, even through the trees. But then we were lucky enough to be with a lot of friends and our neighbours, and I think it was a very special, I don't want to use the word journey, but it was a trip at the starting of our healing process. But it was just as Janet said earlier, it was like a bomb site. It was like a nuclear holocaust had happened, and there was just houses that used to be there weren't there, and just a big pile of ash. And sometimes it was unrecognisable structures there. But then every now and again there'd be a house that was unscathed, and they had daffodils growing outside on their lawn. You can't understand. It's totally nature is a mysterious thing. Yeah.
Hugh, Dwayne is standing there beside him. I wonder if you would just ask if he could talk us through what that experience was like for him coming into the village.
He was a wee bit braver than I. Dwayne, Lisa would like to know how you felt like driving in today. What was it like for you?
I don't think I was particularly brave. I think that was the first time I'd had almost a proper cry since it happened.
So pretty emotional?
Yeah, there was still laughter on the bus and camaraderie between neighbours and friends, and it was just highs and lows and valleys and peaks of emotion, and just bizarre seeing the landscape scarred and then the village not there,
and parts of it are there.
Hugh, when you talked about your house, you said where it is, where it was, where it is. Do you know for sure if any part of it has survived in terms of your house?
Lisa, well, earlier in the report, Lisa, you heard Chris Spears, that's my dad, and he was buggering around with a bloody Jeep. And meanwhile, the place is burning down like Atlanta and Gone with the Wind, and we're part of some bloody holocaust, and there was flames flying everywhere. We're a three-generational house, and we also had guests in that night too. So my priority was safety first, get everybody out, then get the animals, and Dad's stuffing around with his bloody Jeep. Anyway, long story short, we lost Dad in the panic, and we only learned hours later that he was in a safe place, which was further up Lake Ohau Valley. We'd been shuffled down back to Twizel actually, but no cell phones. You grab what you can. We were lucky enough to grab our cell phone and a laptop, but we just had our pyjamas on and unfortunately some socks, and anyway, when you see the side of the village, and I'm sure that you will all see it later on, maybe tomorrow, that it was just like it's a wonder no one perished. It's totally amazing. It's we are lucky that no one has died. We do have something. We've got each other and our lives.
What does that place mean to you and Dwayne?
Well, I'm really, really fortunate. I'm fifth generation on the land, although not directly landowners. We have been for the last 25 years. We built a holiday home, actually. It was a family holiday home. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, Dwayne and I decided to move on with our lives, and I came up here to start the bed and breakfast, and we thought it was just going to be a bit of fun, and it really has taken off. Our bookings were overwhelming, and we're part of the A2O, which is the Alps to Ocean cycle track, which leaves from Mount Cook and rides past Lake Ohau, and then rides on down to Marama and Kura, and then into Oamaru. So I'm fifth generation on the land. My dad played there as a kid. My grandparents played there as a kid. My parents went there in the honeymoon. Hey?
Your brother?
My brother's buried there too. We lost our brother several years ago, and his remains are on the property, so it's really, really special to us. Also too, my great-great-great-grandfather was the first guy to introduce salmon to New Zealand, and he liberated the first lot of salmon into the Ohau Lake in the early 1900s. So DNA of Ohau is in my soul, and we love the fact that people come to see us, because you've got to want to come to Ohau to see it's not on the way to anywhere, and they take with them a happy place, and we love sharing our happy place with people, and we're looking forward to the future that we will share again. And I know at the moment everything's a bit of a blur for everybody, but as a collective team we'll get through this together, and one big unit, a big family unit. But we've been blown away, Lisa, by the love and support and the kind offerings and the cups of tea and the food and the clothing and the beds by not just people in our own community of Twizel and Amarama, but also the wider community of Otago and Canterbury, but the big community of New Zealand. And for us personally, Dwayne and I, it's all our lovely guests that we've been blown away by the love and support and messages and kind wishes and offers of money and to help us out. I mean, we're truly blessed. We are lucky.
Thank you both for joining us today, because I know it's been a hell of a tough few days for you, and especially today, going back and seeing the village of Oho there. That was Hugh and Dwayne, who are the owners of the barn at Killen B&B, and they were among those people who went on 3 buses today to survey the damage, really, and what is left in the village. They couldn't get to their house, but they don't think it's there anymore. The country's largest city and the site of the largest COVID-19 cluster will join the rest of the country in Alert Level 1 on Wednesday at 11:59pm. The announcement by the Prime Minister in Christchurch today is music to the ears of Auckland businesses doing it tough. But others think it would be better to keep some of the restrictions Aucklanders are already used to. Jean Bell reports.
Cabinet has made the call to move Auckland to Alert Level 1 at 11:59pm on Wednesday night. The move means passengers on public transport will no longer be required to wear masks and limits on gatherings are lifted. Many Aucklanders have welcomed the shift, but some are also cautious about dropping down.
I think it was inevitable that we would go back to level 1 because effectively people have been acting like that in the last week or so anyway. We probably do need to be a little more vigilant than we were last time when we went to level 1 because it's not going to go away anytime soon.
I think that masks should still be compulsory on public transport and especially aeroplanes. So I think it's a discipline that needs to be there all the time because clearly community transmission's coming back. There'll be more outbreaks.
Epidemiologist Professor Michael Baker says returning to level 1 misses an opportunity to mandate the wearing of masks on public transport. He says it has been difficult to make wearing masks a habit for many New Zealanders.
Internationally, mask use is re-emerging as a key way of managing and reducing the risk of transmission of this virus. And we haven't really established this properly in New Zealand.
New Zealand clocked a 102-day streak of no reported community transmission before 4 new cases emerged in Auckland. The region was abruptly thrust into Alert Level 3 on August 12th, and the rest of the country was bumped up to Alert Level 2. The origin of the August cluster, which ballooned to New Zealand's largest with 179 cases, is still unknown. Auckland businesses, particularly those in hospitality, were hit hard by the second lockdown. Olivia Carter from the Soul Bar and Bistro in the Auckland Viaduct says the news was so exciting it had her heart racing.
We really need to be in Alert Level 1. Our business couldn't survive on being less than that. So we're excited, our team is excited and looking forward to what this week will now bring.
Auckland Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Michael Barnett says the move is a huge relief for businesses doing it tough. He is hoping people return to a ghostly Auckland Central to work in offices.
And that should see a greater amount of activity and life in central Auckland.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the second lockdown was challenging.
I know for many this one has felt harder, especially for Aucklanders. It was more fragmented with different parts of the country at different levels, and it felt longer and dragged on in what was already starting to feel like a very long year.
She says all signs point to the cluster being under control, but she's urging people to remain vigilant and avoid being complacent around scanning QR codes.
Resurgence of the virus is not our only worry. Resurgence of complacency is right up there too. Daily use of the COVID Tracer app has halved from a peak of 2 million scans to 1 million in the past week. Given that there are 3.9 million New Zealanders aged over 18 years old, at most that means only a quarter is scanning every day.
It's been 9 days since the last reported community case. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei ko Jean Bell tēnei.
It is 25 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know what you think of Auckland going to Alert Level 1 at about midnight on Wednesday. A COVID-positive Donald Trump has drawn sharp criticism after surprising supporters outside the hospital where he's been treated with an impromptu presidential drive-by. The 74-year-old masked president waved from the back of an SUV as his motorcade crawled down the street outside the Walter Reed Medical Centre in Washington, raising concerns for his driver and security detail, who were all masked but in close quarters. At least one of the hospital's doctors tweeted, "The irresponsibility is astounding," and said the staff involved should now go into quarantine for 14 days. Before hitting the road, the president took to his Twitter account with a taster of what he was planning.
I also think we're going to pay a little surprise to some of the great patriots that we have out on the street, and they've been out there for a long time, and they've got Trump flags, and they love our country, so I'm not telling anybody but you, but I'm about to make a little surprise visit.
Well, since being diagnosed on Friday, the president was transferred to hospital where he's been treated with oxygen and also given a steroid used in severe COVID cases, as well as the intravenous antiviral drug Remdesivir and an experimental antibody treatment from the Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. The BBC's North America editor, John Sopel, was there when the drive-by happened.
I was outside the Walter Reed Hospital and I was doing a live shot for our main national news. And just before the live shot, I noticed a lot of police fanning out, and I thought that was a bit odd. I just thought that maybe they were keeping traffic under control, but then they cleared the whole highway, and it's 3 lanes of traffic in either direction. And I thought, well, that's pretty unusual. The whole highway was shut. And I thought, well, Melania Trump? Ivanka? No, they wouldn't close the whole highway. I mean, they could easily do that. And then I see the presidential motorcade slowly progressing up the highway, sort of north of Bethesda, the area of northwest Washington where the hospital is situated. And I think, my God, is the president in the car? And then he goes past the front entrance. I was on the other side of the road. He goes past the front entrance. And you can see the reaction of the Trump supporters who've been making a lot of noise and, wishing the president well, that it must be the president. And he's driving past at about 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour, maybe a bit more, I don't know. And then he goes down the road past all the supporters and does the motorcade does a U-turn and is coming back towards us. And I think, well, he's going to pass within about 6 feet of our camera shot, which is exactly what happened. And I'm thinking, the president has coronavirus. He is highly infectious, and he is sitting in his car with his driver and his bodyguard. Everyone is wearing masks, in fairness, but what an extraordinary thing to go and do. And the thing that occurred to me, over the past 48 hours, we have been trying to ascertain whether the president had received supplemental oxygen to help his breathing. And it suddenly dawned on me tonight that this was his supplemental oxygen. He needed the oxygen of love from his supporters, and he needed to see them cheering and shouting at him, and that is what he wanted. And who is going to deny the President of the United States? And so this enormous convoy was assembled, and it drove up the road, and it drove down the road, and it drove him back into the hospital.
John, you have touched on this, but this is a man who has COVID-19. Yeah, he's wearing a mask and the other people in the vehicle are too, but we're talking about close confines here in a very special car that's probably sealed against every conceivable type of attack imaginable, whether it be from a bullet or from gas. And this is, a virus?
I can only imagine that when the driver's pool heard this is what he wanted to do, there was kind of drawing lots of, well, I don't want to do it. Well, I don't want to do it. Do you want to do it? No, I don't want to do it. It was an extraordinary thing to do. And I'm sure his supporters loved it and lapped it up. But there are serious questions, and that's not being po-faced. I can't think of anybody in any other situation where they have an infectious disease that is ravaging the country, and there have been over 7 million cases and well over 200,000 people who died, that you would go for a bit of a joyride. But that is what unfolded last night outside the Walter Reed Hospital, where I was standing. And honestly, I've been in journalism a large number of years. I have seen some pretty incredible, unusual, bizarre, odd things in my time. And I think that took the biscuit by some margin.
So, he has released a couple of videos, right, since he has been diagnosed with COVID-19. And in his most up-to-date one, I think he talks about the fact that he's basically had a front row seat now in a first-hand lesson in COVID-19, and he gets it. Well, there's a couple of things there, John. Does he seem to get it? And what do we know about his condition? Because there's been some quite inconsistent statements from the medical fraternity.
Lisa, let me come to your last point first of all. There is a clear disjunction between what the doctors are saying, which is, broadly speaking, it's fine, it's under control, everything's okay, he's responding well, he's doing fine, he can go back to the White House tomorrow and continue his treatment there. And the drugs that they are giving him. The drugs that they are giving him are the drugs you give somebody who is very, very seriously ill with COVID. The antiviral drugs, the very powerful steroid drugs, the antibody cocktail that he was given, which is very experimental. They're giving him drugs that have not been approved by the Food and Drugs Administration yet. These are EUAs, emergency use applications, that you can give in extremis. So if you're giving him these drugs in extremis, presumably the situation is not quite as straightforward as it seems. And let me just make one other point, which I think is pretty crucial. God bless New Zealand. You haven't had as much of this as we have here in America or as my home country in the UK has had. But the learning from COVID is not what happens on day 2 or day 3. It's what happens on day 10. And Donald Trump, having been this ill this early on, it may well be that he is well enough to go back to the White House, even do some work, although I can't believe he'll be in the Oval Office. But it comes roaring back at you, and for people who are unlucky. And Donald Trump is 74, male, obese. He's got some comorbidities there. So I think that what happens to us all is we watch the hour by hour, the tick-tock, and think, well, okay, tomorrow he's going back, it's all fine. I don't think it is. I think that, it may well be fine, but I don't think we will know the answer to that question for at least another week. And so I think that, everyone's saying, oh, well, okay, well, we can move on. Let's get on to the next news cycle. Let's get on to the next thing. I don't think it's that straightforward.
So what does this all mean for the campaign too? Because obviously he's going to spend a couple of weeks, best case scenario, in isolation or quarantine, and the clock is ticking down.
I would love to be able to say, I can tell you the answer to that. I can't. I have no idea. And anyone who you say says, well, I can tell you what the trajectory of the next 4 weeks is going to be, don't believe them. We don't know. We're in uncharted territory. There has never been before a president being hospitalised this close to election, let alone in an election where the country is so bitterly divided, let alone when the country is suffering from a pandemic. We are in uncharted territory.
And that was the BBC's North America editor, John Sopel. And coming Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, National's plan to solve what it calls a state of emergency in housing. Police warn about scammers swindling unsuspecting landline users out of thousands of dollars. Boris Johnson warns Brits to get ready for a tough winter ahead as COVID cases continue to climb. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Lake Oho residents have returned to see the devastation caused by the fire that destroyed half their village. 3 buses took them there this afternoon from the makeshift welfare centre in Twizel. Just over 40 of the village's homes have been destroyed or damaged, though some neighbouring ones escaped unscathed. The Cabinet has decided to move Auckland to Alert Level 1 just before midnight Wednesday, in line with the rest of the country. There have been no cases from the Auckland cluster for 10 days, and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says it's highly likely it's now eliminated. She says New Zealand has succeeded a second time in containing the outbreak, but warns against complacency. A 3-month-long police operation targeting organised crime in Waikato is expected to slow the availability of methamphetamine in the region. The police say 40 search warrants have netted 100 people and more than 1 kilogram of meth and 30 illegal firearms. A meth lab has been found today on a rural property near Raglan, bringing the total to 5 after others were located last month. The police say the operation also highlights a significant working relationship between members of different gangs. The jury has retired to consider its verdict in the trial of Auckland Comanchero gang leader Pasilika Naufahu, fellow member Connor Clausen and one other person with name suppression. The trio have been in the High Court in Auckland on 4 charges of money laundering and conspiring to supply the Class B drug pseudoephedrine. 4 weeks into the trial, the defence gave its closing address this morning. More than 165,000 advance voters headed to polling booths over the weekend. Advance voting has become increasingly popular in recent times, accounting for almost half of all votes last election. That's expected to rise to about 60% this round, partially driven by the threat of another lockdown. The polls will remain open for the fortnight before Election Day on the 17th of October. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for the business news now with Nicholas Poynton, who's in our Auckland newsroom. Nicholas, Refining New Zealand is proposing some, radical restructuring to cut its costs to ensure it can operate next year. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, Lisa, this is a company that's been copying it from all angles. So back in April, they announced a strategic review of its business, and this came as they saw a global slump in oil prices, cheap supply from the Asian market, and also just reduced demand for fuel in general because of COVID-19. One thing you have to bear in mind is that the refinery supplies most of the aviation industry's fuel, but at the moment, unfortunately, planes are spending more time on the ground than they are in the air. So today, what we heard from Refining NZ was its first phase of its strategic review. This is a plan about how it plans to operate next year effectively. And to do it, they say they're going to scale back its oil production to 90,000 barrels of crude oil a day. That's a fall of about 20%. It's also scrapping bitumen production altogether. As a result of all these scale backs, they say they're going to have to cull its workforce by about a quarter. That's about 100 jobs lost, taking its total workforce down to about 300. And this restructure, they say it's going to cost the company about $5 million, but it's going to lead to about $20 million in savings in its operational costs. Now, with this company, when they made the strategic review announcement back in April, there was plenty of talk about whether this company, whether the Marsden Point refinery will make the transition to become an import-only terminal. Well, the chief executive today remained thoroughly tight-lipped about that, saying wouldn't give any indications about what the timeline is for any announcements around that, saying that her focus right now is about helping those workers who will be affected by this decision and ensuring that the company is is working and operating effectively next year. We did also hear from First Union, that's the union that represents the workers at Marsden Point, and they have actually called on the government, saying that they want the government to live up to its rhetoric about climate change being both an opportunity and a disaster. They want the government here to partner with the refinery, and here's what First Union organiser Justin Wallace had to say.
There's been a lot of talk in regards to what our next step is in our just transition out of fossil fuels. And again, with the refinery going through this, it's really clear that we need to protect not only the workers up there, but the assets that are up there as well, which have the potential of moving us into this cleaner, greener fuel.
OK, that was First Union organiser Justin Wallace there. Oh, let's move on to Fonterra. So it's decided to sell up big in China.
Yeah, look, the company, they've exited its China farms to an offshore company for nearly or close to over $500 million. So we're told this deal was finalised over the weekend, and it includes 2 of its big farming hubs in northern China. They sold those for about $513 million. And in a separate deal, they agreed to sell 85% of its stake in a local farm for about $42 million. And this, for Fonterra, it really closes the page on what has been quite a tough venture for them over the past few years. Back in 2018, it had to write down the value of its assets in China, and it had to do that again in 2019 as well. And it says that unfortunately, these ventures, they weren't operationally effective at the time. However, Fonterra's chief executive, Miles Hurrell, says he has no regrets. He says it's always been its plan to support the local dairy industry in China, and that was its intention going into this deal. They say the money that they've raised from this big sale, that's going to go towards paying down its debt that's currently on its balance sheet. And what we've seen today from Fonterra is maybe a sign of things to come. Miles Hurrell, that's the CEO for Fonterra, he says it's yogurt business and partnerships with Nestle in Brazil, that's likely to be the next assets to go on the block. So look, we'll wait and see what happens with these assets and see what prices they might fetch.
Before you head off, Nicholas, let's take a quick trot around the markets.
Yeah, sure. Look, the NZX Top 50, it's up by about 75 points to 11,898. Our own dollar is at 66.4 US cents, 92.5 Australian, 51.3 British pence, and gold, it's down slightly by about $5 to 1,893 US dollars an ounce.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton there with Business News. National's promising to urgently address what it calls a state of emergency in housing. Leader Judith Collins unveiled the party's housing policy in South Auckland today, pledging to pass legislation in the first 100 days, similar to that used for the Christchurch rebuild. Ms Collins says while National would repeal the Resource Management Act in its first term, more urgent action is needed. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more of the action on today's campaign trail.
You've got a whole lot of different sized houses here too.
Judith Collins touring a housing development on her home turf, promising National will be the party to get houses built and fix the RMA.
When we've got 20,000 families, or almost 20,000 families on the State House waiting list, yeah, I think it is an emergency now.
If elected, National would pass urgent legislation amending the RMA so that councils would be required to open up 30 years of growth for urban development. Ms Collins says repealing the RMA will take time and action is needed now.
We cannot afford to just go another 3 years waiting for something to happen. Okay. It is absolutely crucial.
The changes would also see the resource consenting process streamlined and the appeals process scrapped. Ms Collins' response to anyone concerned about that.
Well, I say this, I'm more worried about people living in cars.
But Labour leader Jacinda Ardern says the government already fast-tracked consents as part of the COVID-19 recovery response and has initiated significant work on the RMA.
This is our intent with RMA reform, to make it simpler, to make it less costly, but actually to still get to ensure that we have the environmental protections that a community expects. We are doing that work and at the same time have made already inroads through fast-tracking consenting right now.
Greens co-leader James Shaw says this is just electioneering by National.
I mean, to tell you the truth, it's sort of the same old from the National Party. I mean, one of the reasons why we have such horrendous infrastructure problems in Aotearoa New Zealand is because successive governments, but particularly the National Party, have punted for sprawl rather than for densification.
Today, Mr Shaw announced the Greens would overhaul the building code and work towards net zero energy new buildings by 2030 if elected. The policy includes mandatory energy efficiency ratings for all commercial and residential buildings, both new and existing.
Future tenants will want to have the best performing building that they can, and that should encourage building owners to upgrade those buildings over time. But we're not saying that an existing building has to meet a particular standard. We just need to say what its current performance is.
But it wasn't just building regulations in line for a policy overhaul today. National leader Judith Collins savaged Auckland Council this morning, accusing it of failing to deliver for Aucklanders. She says if elected, National would launch an extensive review of Auckland Council and the organisations it controls, with new legislation in place by March 2022.
Because anyone who pays rates in Auckland Council at the moment is wondering what we're getting for our money. And I think too is that Auckland Transport in particular has been an absolute disaster.
Meanwhile, New Zealand First unveiled its Healthy Kiwis package in Rotorua. Leader Winston Peters told a public meeting that New Zealand First would increase Pharmac funding to 1.4% of GDP by 2023 and expand free basic dental care for 18 to 25-year-olds, community service cardholders and SuperGold cardholders.
We can't afford to go on not dealing with this serious problem in the way we should. We can't just have the situation where actually animals are getting better dental care in this country than human beings are.
Ms Ardern opted for her prime ministerial hat over her campaign one as she announced the Auckland level change in Christchurch today. She'll be in full campaign mode there tomorrow before facing off against Ms Collins in the press debate, their first with a full level 1 audience. From Auckland for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Landline users beware. That's the warning from police after a surge in people being conned out of thousands of dollars by phone scammers. 3 men in Auckland, aged in their 20s and 30s, have been charged in relation to alleged money laundering after an 84-year-old victim lost almost $10,000 after getting a call from someone pretending to be from Spark. The way it works, according to the police, is the caller then manipulates the victim into unwittingly allowing them remote access to their computer and bank account. Detective Senior Sergeant Bridget Dole says the scammers are likely locals working for an offshore entity.
There's a variety of ways that people are scammed, and it is generally the same method, probably globally, but people are contacted on their phones, mainly landline phone numbers. And we believe from some investigations that we've done in the past, it's mainly from offshore scammers, and they manage to manipulate who they call to access their computer through a Team Viewer app, which gives the scammers access to their accounts, and that's where it starts.
So in the latest case, we've got this 84-year-old victim. What was the story that they were told when they got the phone call?
Yeah, that is the same case. They've been told that if they don't give access to the computer to fix their email, then they'll lose all their email access. So there's varieties of scams, and everyone would have seen the Spark scam that did the rounds earlier in the year. This is a similar version. They pretend to be from reputable companies, Microsoft, Spark, and in Australia, companies like Telstra. So it's just really what the scammer chooses to say to the people they're calling.
So are they generally just chancing on using a big brand name in the hope that someone does actually have an account with that company?
Yeah, quite often that is the case, and often we know that it's offshore scammers. They use what's called it's a dialing app. So they probably just call many random numbers in New Zealand, whether it's 04 409 for Auckland or 07, etc. And then often our victims are the more vulnerable, I suppose, are the elderly that are at home during the day and still have landline phone numbers. So that's the main victims of this kind of scam.
And once they've kind of got the person hooked in, what are they getting them to do? Are they getting them to download something, or how does that next step happen?
Yeah, they've asked them to click on iTeam Viewer, which gives the caller and the hacker. They ask them to open up their computer. They claim they're from Spark for this particular one, and they need to click on a Team Viewer app. Once the scammer guides them to that on their laptop, and that gives the scammer access to their computer and access to their accounts. So really, the people or the victims that are being called don't realise that that is actually the case, and money starts to be moved from their accounts on the computer online.
So, Detective, from what you're seeing, do they take a wodge of money at the same time, or are they just pilfering little bits over a period of time?
Oh, look, I can't be specific. It's a variety of ways. Some of the people we've spoken to have lost significant amounts of money. One earlier in the year lost, up to $250,000. So it's our message is the prevention aspect. If anyone doubts any phone call that they have, or anyone guides them to open any applications on their computer, just don't do it. No one will ask or ring you to do that.
And that's Detective Senior Sergeant Bridget Dole. It is 11 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. To the UK now, where a dramatic surge in COVID-19 cases is being blamed on an IT error. Close to 23,000 cases were confirmed on Sunday, adding to the 13,000 confirmed on Saturday. Public Health England says a computer glitch led to a long lag in about 16,000 cases being counted toward official numbers. It says Prime Minister Boris Johnson warns of a tough winter ahead. The BBC's Ian Watson reports.
How times change. Despite a big election victory, many of Boris Johnson's winning policies have been obscured by the coronavirus crisis.
Thank you. Temperature check here.
The political temperature is rising, with COVID cases going up and his poll ratings coming down. Today he acknowledged people's frustrations, but delivered the grim news that it might not be all over by Christmas.
They're furious with me and they're furious with the government.
They are.
But, I've got to tell you, in all candour, it's going to continue to be bumpy through to Christmas. It may even be bumpy beyond.
Labour are accusing him of losing control of the virus. He acknowledged that testing needed to improve and promised that it would.
It is not perfect, Andrew. I'm not going to claim it's perfect.
It's certainly not.
Am I frustrated with it? Yes, of course I'm frustrated with it. Am I going to blame NHS Test and Trace and attack the thousands of people who are, I think, doing a good job? No, of course I'm not. But I take full responsibility for the service. I think by international comparators, it is really very, very good indeed.
Boris Johnson will speak online to his virtual party conference this week, and some of the faithful want him to reflect on his performance as Prime Minister. I've been speaking to some long-standing Conservative MPs and some of the new intake, and quite a few of them say they still want further proof that Boris Johnson, having battled the virus himself, is still up for the job. And some say they'd like to see the old Boris back, the man who used to denounce the doomsters and gloomsters, but who these days seems to be the bearer of bad news.
This is a government that's facing an unprecedented crisis, and I think that if people wanted me to approach it with, the sort of buoyancy and élan and all the qualities that I normally bring to things, I think people would think that was totally inappropriate.
And as for his health,
the issue is that when I, alas, got this wretched thing, I was too fat.
But now
I am fitter than several butchers' dogs.
As for other people's health, households in Oldham have been living under enhanced restrictions since August, and some want to know when this will end.
If the restrictions are still as confusing, I think it might increase even more because people will just do their own thing.
I do think it's going to destroy Oldham. Not a lot, pubs are restricting people coming in, people aren't going in.
We need to abide by the rules so then it won't last longer than it has to.
Labour says more clarity is needed on when and why restrictions are imposed.
We're not going to blame the British public like Boris Johnson tried to do.
Local,
We're proud of what the British public are doing. We understand why local restrictions may be needed, but I think it's Andy Burnham who's been saying it's a bit like Hotel California. Places go into these restrictions, you check in but you can never leave.
Boris Johnson says we should go forward without fear but with common sense. But it seems that balancing act may have to be maintained well into the new year.
And that is the BBC's Ian Watson there. Back home on the campaign trail, gay conversion therapy will be banned by Labour if it's re-elected to government. The pseudoscience claims to be able to suppress or change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity and is often practiced in private or faith-based institutions. The so-called therapy has been widely debunked by the scientific and medical community and human rights advocates as being harmful to mental health as well as being discriminatory. Earlier this year, a UN expert called for a global ban on the bogus therapy. Labour MP and Rainbow spokesperson Tamati Coffey announced the party will pass a law banning conversion therapy, and he joins me now. Good evening, Tamati. How are you defining gay conversion therapy, for the purposes of passing a law? What would it be by definition?
Yeah, look, by definition, it's around the idea that a person's sexual orientation or gender identity can or needs to be changed. So that's kind of how we're putting it. Of course, we'll really lock in what that means when we go through the select committee stage. But in a nutshell, that's it.
And you think it's achievable with a law?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually need to listen to the people on the ground and the experts that are telling us that they don't want this. The Rainbow community around New Zealand have been advocating for this for quite some time. We haven't managed to get it over the line in our previous term, but actually, if we're re-elected, we intend to ban it.
And that is the thing, because you're laying out for me here that it's a relatively simple process, relatively simple definition. So why haven't you done it earlier?
Yeah, look, we've been, I think that you know the answer to the question.
No, you tell me. You tell me.
Yeah, okay, all right, let me tell you. We've been part of a coalition government that have had differing parties with different views. We've supported banning it as a party with our Labour MP, Maya Lubeck. She's put in a bill saying that as a member's ballot, she wanted to ban it. We were in full support of it, but actually we're saying that we're going to progress this work in government if we're re-elected.
Who ripped on the handbrake specifically, Tamati?
I'm not quite sure about that, Lisa.
So, well, you're in a government with two other partners. Which of the other partners was it that wasn't keen on this?
I'm focused on the future, which is actually getting this over the line. And actually, the way that the polls are looking, we might be able to do that. So that's where my focus is.
That's the point, isn't it, Tamati? In order to let people make an informed decision, to either give you the power to do this on your own or with partners who agree with you on this, they need to know exactly what happened. So why not just lay it out there? Who stopped this going through?
Oh, look, I really don't want to get caught up in that. At the end of the day, we need to focus on getting this over the line. It's what our community wants us to do, and it's what we're pledging to do.
Was Winston Peters the handbrake?
We're focused on the future.
Don't you think you owe people an answer to that question, given that they are going to the polls, or may be preparing to vote tomorrow even?
Yeah, you know what? I think that we can leave it to New Zealanders to decide what kind of handbrakes there were. But at the end of the day, I remain committed to actually getting this over the line on behalf of all of those people around New Zealand that want us to, that need us to.
If you're in a coalition, is this just Labour policy, or are you telling voters right here and now it's a bottom line regardless of who you are in government with if you are returned?
It is something, it's been a Labour Party policy for this whole of the last term. It's something that we're quite staunch about. So actually, if we were in a coalition government, obviously it's one of the things that would be negotiated around the table. But we've put this off for far too long. So actually, I'd be in support of making sure that actually this is something that we do draw a line on. It's something that our Rainbow communities want us to do. So I'll be advocating at every opportunity.
Well, you've got some airtime now. If you're making it a bottom line and guaranteeing that you'll push it through, here's the opportunity to tell voters that. Are you going to?
Look, I'm not the one that makes those kinds of decisions, but what voters can believe is that we actually do have a really strong Rainbow caucus, and if we are re-elected to government, this is going to be one of the things that we absolutely advocate for.
You had a strong Rainbow caucus this term as well, and you couldn't make it happen.
Yep, we had that inside of a coalition government, and unfortunately we weren't able to get it over the line. But again, we're focused on the future, and actually this is something that we're committing to.
How widely spread do you think this practice is in New Zealand?
Do you know what? I'm not 100% sure on that. We've heard anecdotes all over the place. There was a recent study which talked about the fact that 1 in 6 of those participants in that New Zealand study were basically they identified that there were professionals that worked inside the sector that tried to convert them away from their gender identity or their position of actually being trans as well. So I'm not sure how widespread it is. We do a really terrible job of counting our trans population and counting our rainbow population. We know that, and that's why we've made some changes to the census so that we will be able to count our rainbow community. But at the moment, we have really scant data when it comes to our community.
Is this kind of so-called therapy, is it abuse?
Do you know what? It actually it is abuse because it leads to mental health problems, it leads to anxiety, it leads to depression, and as a result, we actually do need to sort it out. It's even been linked to suicide, and amongst our rainbow community, we do have suicides in our community. We need to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to bring that rate down, and actually by banning conversion therapy, if that's something we need to do to ensure that, then it's something we will do.
We've got about 30 seconds left, Tamati, but some people would say, what happens to religious freedom and expressing your views on this, and that any law would curb that freedom? What is your response to that criticism?
Yeah, look, we are absolutely not proposing to curb anyone's freedom of expression. In fact, what we're looking to do is make sure that the rainbow community up and down New Zealand can express themselves without having that discriminatory kind of practice imposed upon them. It's harmful, and we need to bring it to an end.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is Tamati Coffey, who's Labour's rainbow spokesperson there, announcing a ban on conversion therapy.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The people of Lake Oho have returned to see firsthand the devastation caused by the fire that ripped through their village, destroying nearly half of it. 3 buses took them there this afternoon from the makeshift welfare centre in Twizel. Anand Zaki reports.
A strong smell of smoke and charcoal hits you as you approach the lakeside village. The only thing left in what were once family homes are chimneys, frames and basements. Strikingly, some houses right next to burnt ones are completely untouched. Fire and Emergencies Principal Rural Fire Officer Graham Still says it came down to the direction the flames were travelling in. He says seeing the houses along with affected families earlier today was a humbling experience. In Twizel, Anand Zaki.
79-year-old Oho resident Chris Spears has described his narrow escape from the fire. He says that when he tried to get out in his Jeep, it got stuck on a stump as the flames roared around.
I had to pad the foot and come out and climb up a bank, and the fire was sort of licking my backside. Yeah, so then the fire brigade man found me crawling up the grass, and so then I was bundled into the fire engine and taken out.
Oho local Chris Spears. A public health expert says returning Auckland to level 1 misses an opportunity to mandate the wearing of masks on public transport. Passengers on public transport in Auckland will no longer need to wear masks from midnight on Wednesday when the city moves down from level 2. Michael Baker says it has been difficult to get many New Zealanders to develop the habit of wearing masks.
Internationally, mask use is re-emerging as a key way of managing and reducing the risk of transmission of this virus. And we haven't really established this properly in New Zealand.
Epidemiologist Michael Baker. New Zealand First is promising more funding for Pharmac, which its leader Winston Peters says is failing New Zealanders. Mr Peters unveiled the party's Healthy Kiwi package at a public meeting in Rotorua today. The package includes boosting Pharmac funding to 1.4% of GDP by 2023, in line with the OECD average. Mr Peters says Pharmac needs more money to bring spending into line with other countries.
A lot of people are losing life because we don't have treatment and the kind of pharmaceuticals that they desire. We're not spending nearly enough against our GDP as we should be spending, and we need to do that, turn it around the next 2 or 3 years.
New Zealand First is also promising to expand free basic dental care for 18 to 25-year-olds and community service Super Gold card holders. More than 165,000 advance voters cast their election ballots at the weekend. Advance voting has become increasingly popular in recent times, accounting for almost half of all votes last election. That's expected to rise to about 60% this time around, partly driven by the possibility of another lockdown. The polls will remain open for the fortnight before Election Day on Saturday, October the 17th. The Southland Rural Support Trust says the latest widespread flooding is another blow for its farmers, who have already had a difficult lambing and calving season. The region's southern coast endured 24 hours of constant rain over the weekend, with Riverton, Wyndham and Edendale among the worst hit areas. Kathy Cotter, who chairs the trust, says the flooding hit very suddenly.
It really did take people by surprise, and there was a lot of farmers that were busy out trying to move stock ahead of the approaching water. We've got really good reporting systems on our rivers down here, but, they just came up at an alarming rate.
Kathy Cotter says there have been some stock losses as well as damage to fences and paddocks. It's 4 minutes past 6. Australia have made a strong start to their run chase in the second Rose Bowl One-Day Cricket International against New Zealand in Brisbane. A short time ago, they were 117 for 1 after 20 overs, chasing 253 for victory. The White Ferns lost their pace bowling spearhead when Leah Tahuhu limped off midway through her third over. New Zealand earlier posted 252 for 9 from their 50 overs, Captain Sophie Devine top scoring with 79. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp says his side lost the plot in their 7-2 loss to Aston Villa in English football's Premier League. Following from Manchester United's 6-1 defeat to Tottenham Hotspur, Liverpool added to a remarkable day by becoming the first reigning champions to concede 7 goals in a league match since Arsenal in 1953. It was also Klopp's worst ever result.
The game is easy to analyse if you want, because the mistakes were so obvious, but it doesn't make it better, obviously. Who wants to lose 7-2? Years ago we told ourselves we want to create history. That was history tonight, but obviously the wrong one.
Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp. And Spanish golfer Sergio Garcia has won his first PGA Tour title since the 2017 Masters. He birdied his final hole to win this week's tournament in Mississippi by a shot. Garcia has dedicated the victory to the 2 uncles he lost to COVID-19. That's the news.
This week on Nights, Melody Thomas speaks to intimacy coordinator Robbie Taylor-Hunt, keeping things safe and seemly on set when they're filming sex scenes. Nick Bollinger samples a posthumous collection of unreleased prints, and part 2 of Best of the West, 25 years of Auckland's Going West Festival, with the 2017 corridor between Dame Anne Salmond and Moana Maniapoto. On Nights with Melody Thomas, in for Brian Crump after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Fine today, partly cloudy tomorrow with areas of early fog. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine and warm. Whanganui to Wellington, including Wairarapa, fine at first. Cloudy periods developing with a few showers south of Palmerston North tomorrow night. Gale nor'westerlies in exposed places of Wellington and Wairarapa tomorrow. Nelson mainly fine, scattered rain developing tomorrow night. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing today, drizzle developing in Westland, rain developing tomorrow morning, clearing from the south later in the day. For Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, fine today with gale nor'westerlies in exposed places, rain or drizzle spreading north tomorrow, then clearing from the south. Fiordland, a few showers turning to rain tonight, clearing to isolated coastal showers tomorrow morning, and Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, showers tomorrow night. RNZ National. Almost 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Auckland's move from Level 2 to Level 1 has been met with overwhelming support from residents strolling Queen Street this afternoon. Checkpoint reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe hit the CBD just after Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's 1 p.m. announcement. Now, our two Nicks couldn't find anyone who disagreed with the decision to move the City of Sales to Level 1 from 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday. But some called for their fellow Aucklanders to remain vigilant by wearing masks and keeping their distance.
Auckland's going to Level 1 from Wednesday. Do you think that's the right call?
It should be. So I guess the majority of cases are in the managed isolation. We don't have any community transfer at the moment. So I think that's the right decision for the businesses because it's been the second lockdown. And like you can see the Queen Street, it's like more like empty and most of the business are closed down here. So I think it's a right step to go in for Level 1.
Yeah, we should be in Level 1 because we got punished more than the rest of the country by being forced into a second lockdown where we shouldn't have been, when the rest of the country shouldn't have. So we just, the way I look at it, we're used to it because this Cobra is here to stay. I reckon it's not going to goes. So we're going to have to get on with life the way it should be.
Auckland hasn't really noticed. Like, we were here walking around when this was still like fairly new and when lockdown was just happening again, and our first thoughts were like, oh my god, I can't believe it's happening again. But if you looked around, Auckland didn't notice. This was as packed as it was like 6 months, a year ago, when the quarantine wasn't even a thing, when lockdown wasn't a thing. So like us going back to level 1,
it doesn't seem to be making a difference, to be fair.
I think that now it's time to back to normal, because I think now it's safer. But you still have to keep like a social distance. Maybe not 2 meters, but still 1 meter, and then you have to wear the mask because it's quite important.
Definitely about time. People are ready for the shops to start opening. I think we've suffered enough, and there's no community transmitting, so let's get down.
I don't think business can handle any more lockdowns, especially in the tourist industry.
I guess it should be the right call moving to level 1, because I think the atmosphere is already level 1 anyway. So I guess it's the right call to do at the moment.
So it feels like level 1 anyway, so why not?
Why not move, yeah.
Do you think, businesses will be welcoming the move? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's time from a business point of view to be going down a level to make it slightly easier?
Yeah, I think it's overdue as well, yeah. I think they'd be welcoming that maybe a couple of weeks ago with that. So yeah, I'll be moving to level 1 in a business standpoint. From Wednesday, 100%, they'll be supporting that.
I honestly don't really have that harsh of an opinion on it, because I think Jacinda's doing like a pretty good job at keeping everything like on track. So I think as long as we don't have like another flare, I think level 1's probably fine.
And how about yourself? Level 1 from Wednesday, the right call?
I would say Jacinda knows what she's doing because she's listening to all the health experts, so I would say it's definitely the right call. Yeah.
So it would be fair to say that up until this point, you trust the process, you trust the path that's taken us on?
Yeah, because so far New Zealand has been one of the safest countries in terms of COVID. So yeah, I definitely trust her professional opinion.
Yes, to be honest, yeah. I think that is the right call. Get like New Zealand in a safe place. Now we're back to normal, everything. I think, how many cases now? 40? 40. So yeah, I think we're good. I think it's good.
And what about you, man? That's right call?
I just miss clubbing. So as soon as the club's open, I'm going.
Bro, send them home.
So you're looking forward to be able to actually go to a club and have a dance and all that sort of stuff.
Bring back level 1. We're partying for level 1, man.
And Auckland's move to level 1 means it's game on between New Zealand and Australia at Eden Park on Sunday the 18th. The second Bledisloe Cup test would have been passed to Dunedin if Auckland remained in level 2 restrictions. Advance ticket sales for the Eden Park game kick off at 10 a.m. tomorrow, with public sale to follow from midday Thursday. And if you're listening to that, we'll put the video up on our Facebook page so you can watch it too. The Department of Conservation has been accused of mismanaging and neglecting land at Lake Oho, where fires have been raging. At least 50 structures have been deemed uninhabitable. Farmers who live near Lake Oho say they've been warning DOC and the government for years about the imminent danger of fire. They say wild tussock and pine have been left to grow out of control. But the Conservation Minister has hit back. Sally Murphy filed this report.
For some, the wildfires near Oho have left many people shocked. For others, it was an accident waiting to happen.
I've been in the High Country Committee for probably 12 years, and it's been a concern right back then. We brought it up every year in conference, regards with DOC, with closing land up, and the fuel that has built up over the years. It's going to be an ongoing issue, and the way the season's lining up, this is pretty early to get hit, but it won't be the last one this year.
That's Rob Stokes, chairman of the Federated Farmers South Island High Country Committee. He says large pockets of DOC land which are not grazed are full of material that can carry fire very quickly.
They build up over years because there's no grazing. Where the country used to be clean, we could have buffer zones, whereas you'll see it with farms in the Mackenzie, even where it's farmed and cultivated, you're not going to have fire risk, but wherever you've got conservation land, it's just a bomb waiting to go off.
Mr Stokes says work to control wilding pines in the area is working well, but more needs to be done to control vegetation. Andrew Simpson, who farms merino and cattle at Balmoral Station, agrees. He's even spoken to the Minister of Conservation, Eugenie Sage, about his concerns.
She didn't dismiss grazing it again, but
I've said that she might have to do some strategic fuel loading burns to get rid of some of the problem areas, and if you did it like they do in Australia and have strategic burn-offs to create fire breaks, it would alleviate a lot of the risk of so much land being back.
But the minister has pushed back.
Federated Farmers, I think, was making a push for free grazing. Nature doesn't start fires except by occasional lightning strikes. It's managing human activities that's the key. I think with a changing climate, we have to look at land management and the bigger picture, and that's why we're doing things like wild and conifer control.
The fire is thought to have been started by an electrical arc from overhead power lines. But Network Waitaki, who maintains the lines in the area, says it's too early to say what caused the blaze. It says it's assisting Fire and Emergency with their investigation and will work to restore power to the village. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
In 2017, Labor campaigned on transformative change in the justice sector, promising to target the causes of crime and the cycle of reoffending. It held a Justice Summit in 2018 that delved into all aspects of the system in an effort to get a mandate for reform. There, Justice Minister Andrew Little faced backlash from victims who felt sidelined and re-victimised, and he quickly announced there would be a separate victims meeting. But many victims still feel completely let down by the system. Political reporter Yvette McCullough looks at what progress has been made and what parties are promising to do for victims.
Johnny's anniversary of his death, so we decided that we would purposefully come away. And
Stacey and Greg Williston lost their 2-year-old son a year ago. It was the end of term and they were on a cycle walking track, making the most of daylight saving.
Jonathan absolutely loves biking and going on a bike.
Mrs. Williston says when it started getting dark, they turned to go home.
A speeding motorbike came out of nowhere and just drove straight into Greg and Jonathan.
She says from the outset the police told them they wouldn't find any justice. The offender, who was 17, was given 100 hours community service. Mrs. Williston says the focus of the court and the assigned social worker was on not ruining the rest of his life.
He said, I'm not here for you, I'm here for the offender and what's in the best interest of the offender. It's in his best interest that he doesn't get penalised. And we're like, are you serious? Like, he's just killed our son and you think that's not worth anything?
Mr. Williston says their victim impact statements were heavily censored and they felt completely shut out of the court process.
We're not even involved in the case, we're just sitting at the back and sort of spectators. Yeah. But you just feel like there's nothing you can do. We can't.
The Crown versus the offender, not the victims versus the
But I don't understand
offender.
Because it's our son and it's our lifelong injuries. He's broken a law. We're the result of that, so we should be more involved in that situation.
Improving things for victims is an area where political parties find common ground. National Justice spokesperson Simon Bridges says National would put victims at the heart of the justice system.
That's more than just rhetoric. I think that's an ethos we would take. And you see that, for example, in things like a victim notification register. But it is opt-in, and we say that's not good enough. Actually, if we're victim-centric, it should be opt-out.
Labor spokesperson Andrew Little says his party's views have evolved somewhat over the past 3 years, and it wants to give victims a stronger voice.
I think it's about a better understanding of what it is to make sure that for victims who are drawn into the criminal justice system, not because of anything they've done or chosen to do, but because of what's happened to them, that their place has got to be better respected in the system.
New Zealand First says it would prioritise the principles of the Sentencing Act to focus on the needs of the victim, then the community, and lastly, the offender. But criminal lawyer Elizabeth Hall says most of the time the line between offender and victim is almost non-existent.
I can't think of a single one of the clients that I've represented that also doesn't have a horrendous background and story of how they've got there.
She believes the idea that deterrence works is misplaced. ACT leader David Seymour disagrees. He's pitching to add burglary to the 3 strikes, saying it's not a property crime, it's a personal invasion.
Generally, it's a small group of professional burglars who get away with a large number of them. So if you do get one, it's worth putting them away for a long time. Just bear in mind, someone that's convicted of 3 has probably done a lot more than that.
But Ms Hall says 3 strikes simply doesn't work.
Burglary, for example, covers an enormous range of criminal wrongdoing, so it's really not just irresponsible but inappropriate to tell judges, look, you have to deal with it in a certain way. It will lead to injustice.
She says New Zealand's only just putting the brakes on following the United States down the path of mass incarceration, and whoever's in the next government has to keep pushing for a better way. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The jury has retired to consider its verdict in the trial of a Comanchero gang leader. Pasilika Naufa'u and his fellow member Connor Clausen deny money laundering and conspiring to supply the Class B drug pseudoephedrine, while a third person with name suppression denies money laundering. Katie Todd has been in court.
The 4-week trial wrapped up in the High Court at Auckland this morning, with the lawyer representing Naufa'u dismissing the Crown case as a theory and its witnesses as, quote, volatile and slippery. Defence lawyer Ron Mansfield told jurors the police had thrown all the resources it could at monitoring Naufa'u in April last year, after he'd made himself known as president of the Comancheros. Mr Mansfield told them 7 or 8 undercover police were involved in the sting, yet failed to retrieve any direct evidence.
They were looking for drugs, they were looking for cash, they were looking for anything they could find on termination that would reveal what they suspected, that this man was involved within New Zealand or perhaps offshore in drug dealing activities. Well, their investigation, folks, after 1 year revealed as much as that very careful and diligent search of his home revealed nothing.
The Crown says that Clausen worked for Naufa'u and was at one point tasked with exchanging $1 million for the Class B drug pseudoephedrine. It also claimed the person with name suppression helped launder money by making tens of thousands of dollars of cash deposits, and questioned if they could possibly have done so without knowing or suspecting where that money came from. Ron Mansfield said there was no proof the cash deposits derived from drug dealing activities, and the Crown's 2 witnesses weren't reliable. He described one as unpredictable, manipulative and volatile, and the other as crooked, one who peddled so much snake oil the Crown had slipped in how it wanted to present Naufa'u. Mr Mansfield told the jury that left 2 possibilities.
The reality is there's one of 2 options. He's not a drug dealer, or if he is, he's so good at it that they couldn't find any reliable or credible evidence to support the fact he is.
Justice Graham Lang told the jurors they must reach a unanimous verdict based on facts.
You can't look into somebody's mind. You have to look at all of the surrounding circumstances. You satisfy yourself as to what's been reliably established, and you draw logical and reasoned deductions from those facts that have been established. And that's how you establish what's in somebody's mind.
The jury was dismissed with a reminder from Justice Lang of their most important duty, to consider each defendant innocent until proven guilty. For Checkpoint, Katie Todd, TNA.
President Trump's been strongly criticised for his surprise motorcade ride outside the Walter Reed Hospital earlier today. The president left hospital, where he's been treated for COVID-19, and was driven by Secret Service agents to wave at supporters gathered outside. One doctor at Walter Reed, Dr James Phillips, tweeted that the drive-by was unnecessary. Dr Jonathan Rayner, who was Vice President Dick Cheney's cardiologist, told CNN it was irresponsible.
His attending physician should have said, no, sir, you can't do that. We'll not permit it. As my colleague, Dr. James Phillips at GW said earlier today, that car is not just bulletproof. That car has been sealed against chemical attack. So the air in that car is recirculated. So what the president did by insisting on that joyride was expose the Secret Service agents sitting just literally inches away from him to recirculated air, and they have to hope that those masks they're wearing are effective.
Dr Jonathan Rayner speaking to CNN. Well, President Trump's doctors say the trip was medically safe and he could be back in the White House tomorrow. That's despite them admitting he received supplemental oxygen and the condition of his lungs is being monitored. The president's also taken the steroid dexamethasone, which is used in severe cases. Chris Dignam reports.
The president has continued to improve.
The medical team treating President Donald Trump for COVID-19 said he was feeling well on Sunday, and that they're monitoring the condition of his lungs after receiving supplemental oxygen on Friday.
Over the course of his illness, the president has experienced 2 episodes of transient drops in his oxygen saturation.
Dr. Sean Conley acknowledged that Trump's blood oxygen levels had dropped in previous days, admitting that the president's condition had been worse than previously disclosed, a day after contradictory messages from White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows caused widespread confusion about Trump's health.
Why were you so reluctant until today to disclose that the president had been administered oxygen?
It's a good question.
Thank you.
I was trying to reflect the upbeat attitude that the team, the president, that his course of illness has had. Didn't want to give any information that might steer the course of illness in another direction, and in doing so, it came off that we were trying to hide something, which wasn't necessarily true, so here I have it. He is the fact of the matter is that he's doing really well.
The 74-year-old was flown to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center on Friday and has since taken 2 doses of the antiviral drug remdesivir, as well as the steroid dexamethasone, which is used in critical cases. Despite that, Dr. Brian Garibaldi of Johns Hopkins Hospital said Trump could be back at the White House as soon as Monday.
If he continues to look and feel as well as he does today, our hope is that we can plan for a discharge as early as tomorrow to the White House where he can continue his treatment course.
I'm starting to feel good.
The day before, he released a 4-minute video saying the real test of his condition will come over the next few days. Officials in New Jersey said on Sunday that the White House gave them the names of more than 200 people who attended events around Trump's fundraising trip to Bedminster last week. Several members of Trump's inner circle have tested positive for the virus, as well as 3 Republican senators and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who said he was checking himself into a hospital as a precautionary measure. Trump's illness has upended his re-election campaign as it seeks to fend off Democratic challenger Joe Biden. His campaign is using the president's positive test to underscore a consistent message that Biden would handle the pandemic better than Trump. A Reuters Ipsos poll taken on October 2nd and 3rd, after the president tested positive for the virus, found Biden leading Trump by 10 percentage points nationally, and that nearly 2/3 of Americans thought that Trump probably would not have been infected if he had taken the virus more seriously.
Reuters' Chris Dignam with that report. Back home, Wellington's beloved eco-sanctuary, Zealandia, is mounting a large-scale trapping and surveillance effort after someone deliberately cut a hole in its predator-free fence. The 225-hectare sanctuary is home to many rare and threatened native species, including kiwi, hihi and tuatara. Zealandia's director, Dr. Danielle Shanahan, told reporter Eva Corlett she's horrified by the deliberate vandalism.
We don't have any cameras in that area. We are absolutely gobsmacked and dumbfounded as to who could have done this. It really is a hugely impactful thing to do. Of course, we're mounting a major predator incursion response just in case something did get in. So the impact on our operations is quite significant, and the potential impact of an intruder is absolutely huge on the rare and threatened species that are inside the sanctuary.
If, say, just one stoat managed to get in, what sort of damage could that do?
They can do an incredible amount of damage. We know from other sanctuaries that a single animal can take out an entire population of a species when it's something like a stoat that's gotten in. There are other things that are slightly less impactful, like rats, but whatever it is, we have to get on top of it as quick as possible, particularly now as the birds are starting to breed.
Has anything like this ever happened before?
Not of my knowledge. As far as I understand, in the 20 years of that fence being up, we've never had a deliberate, malicious attack on that fence. So this is the first time that we've really experienced that.
Have you ever had any threats from anyone or any groups?
No, we've nothing suspicious to go on, no obvious, enemies. People really love this place. It's something that's become a bit of a hub for our volunteers and our members, but also it's had a huge impact on the city. Kaka, a species previously extinct from this region, can now be found all over our city, and that's because of Zealandia. People, Wellingtonians, are very proud of that, and it's something that they connect to and identify with, so it's quite hard to understand what sort of person might have done this. But probably our best security measure is just making sure all of our, wonderful Wellington residents know that this is an issue and are looking for both damage to the fence and reporting any vandalism that they might witness occurring.
And that was Zealandia's director, Dr. Danielle Shanahan, speaking there to our reporter, Eva Corlett. Let's get to your feedback now before we head off. On the issue of so-called gay conversion therapy, Labour has announced that if it's elected back to government, it will ban gay conversion therapy, bringing in a law outlawing it. This person says, how is gay conversion therapy still a thing? Are we living in the 1950s? Someone else pretty much agrees, says, I don't care who bans this barbaric practice. It's not the Middle Ages anymore. Can't happen soon enough. On the fires at Lake Oho, Catherine Dick says, aroha nui to Hugh and Dwayne at Lake Oho. Such a great team. All the best for the tough road ahead. That couple thinks that they have lost their Airbnb, that it's been destroyed in the fire. Haven't got close enough to see for sure, but pretty sure. And Kelly says, I'm feeling stoked and marvellous for Auckland to be shifting to alert level 1 with the rest of the country. And that is at 11:59pm on Wednesday. You can hug an Aucklander with caution and permission, of course. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our stories online.
Z News headlines, I'm Catriona McLeod. The people of Lake Oho returned today to see the devastation caused by the fire that destroyed almost half their village. A public health expert says moving Auckland to level 1 misses the chance to get people wearing masks on public transport, a key international tool against COVID. Scientists in India have developed a new paper-based test for coronavirus based on a gene-editing technology which could return results within an hour. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
It will take pressure off the hotel quarantine system that is really backlogged here. There's a lot of Australians waiting to come home from overseas.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
First in the firing line for this new police accreditation system seems to be freelancers and students. The goalposts do keep changing.